So now it's all out there. Penn State could have kept Micah Shrewsberry if they really wanted to. But that's the thing. I don't think they did.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, you are Locked On Nittany Lions. Thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every single day. My name is Zach Seyko. I'm your host. And the everydayers, remember him. I've given him a little bit of a summer break here, just like Penn State classes are done. Adam Sheetz is back on the show. And it's very fitting, Adam, because basketball, at least the news of Micah Shrewsberry, the whole debacle going from Penn State, the Notre Dame plucking him, right? That's what everybody's Penn State doesn't lose coaches. They don't lose coaches to other programs, but in this case they did. And now a new article comes out from CBS Sports, excellent reporting, the whole, like from start to finish of everything that happened from January, where Notre Dame announced publicly that Mike Bray was going to step down. This was his final season. And then the recruitment for a new coach started. And at the end of the day, Micah Shrewsberry ends up being the next head coach for the Fighting Irish, but Penn State doesn't lose coaches like this. Penn State is supposed to be that destination job. And you read the article and you look at the analysis, Adam. Micah Shrewsberry was going to stay at Penn State had they offered him earlier. They waited too long, and Notre Dame had sung his praises for the longest time. And now he's back in Indiana, his home state. There's more to this, though, but Penn State could have had Micah Shrewsberry for 7 years and not Mike Rhoades had things been a little different.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to they waited, and Pat Kraft chose to wait to plan the extension when Micah Shrewsberry initially approached him about some extension talks back in January, and then they kind of let that go on. And then when you read the article, it looks like the offer came out of the blue then to him right before they were getting ready to leave for the NCAA tournament. His agent had been working on an extension. They really didn't tell Micah, and now you could say that's a good thing, let Micah focus on the basketball. The team was making a run, let him continue to focus on that and not worry about the extension. But it was kind of, Micah wasn't really in the loop on the extension talks, and then it coming so late when he had already had preliminary discussions with Notre Dame at that point. His wife, who was heavily involved in the article, great reporting, getting Molly in there, who's a great person and definitely had a lot of insight into this decision for the family. And you just look at it, just waiting so long. She was excited to get a chance to go back home to Indiana. The family seemed excited, and it just allowed him to really start to think more and more about going to Notre Dame. And then when Penn State finally gave him that extension, he went and had the final talks in Pittsburgh with the Notre Dame executives, the athletic director, and the president. And it came down to he decided to go to Notre Dame. You can't blame him because Penn State, they had it right in front of him. All they had to do was give him the extension in January, and he probably signs it because he made the point in the article as well when he was interviewed. Penn State was not in a great spot in January. They were struggling. They were having their worst stretch of the season, and they'd eventually turn it around. So if you extend him then, he probably signs really quickly, just try to get that security. Who knows what's going to happen during that season, but it was definitely a tough break for Penn State. Now, obviously, they get Mike Rhoades, so it's a good thing they were able to rebound and get a guy that a lot of people believe in, but it's really tough to think that all they had to do was offer that to him sooner, and he stays at Penn State.
Was that the case? I mean, it sounds like Penn State didn't want to commit to Micah Shrewsberry long-term, that they said, yeah, January was rough. You read through the articles and the details are there. At the time of when the conversations with Micah and Notre Dame started, it was, Penn State was 5-9 in the month of January. They had just blown a 19-point lead to Rutgers. And that was the Zoom call, the infamous Zoom call that everybody talks about, that, Micah was interviewing behind closed doors and secretly wanted out of Penn State. And then you have this revelation that he would have stayed had the offer been presented sooner rather than on the night of them going to play against Texas A&M. And there's some other details in here as well, but do you get the impression that Pat Kraft and Penn State ultimately didn't want to commit to Micah Shrewsberry? Because a lot of things have changed now with the direction of the program, but when you think about, there was the article that talked about the Zoom call or the meeting that talked about NIL, and there were board members and there were boosters, and Pat Kraft and Micah Shrewsberry were on it. And that was a disrespectful call, to say the least, where the conversation was about improving Penn State men's basketball and that program as a whole. It wasn't about football. It wasn't about baseball. It wasn't about hockey, wrestling. It wasn't about anything else. And there were board members that were saying, well, why does Penn State basketball need all this attention? We have 31 varsity sports. What about them? And Micah Shrewsberry's sitting on that call. So I get the impression that just Penn State really didn't respect Micah Shrewsberry as a head coach.
I think it comes down to, they are invested in building an athletic program, but they don't want to focus in on some other things. Like 31 varsity sports, that's important to a lot of people at Penn State. And I think it's something that makes Penn State very unique. And I think it's a great thing for them to have. But when you look at the money being brought in, men's basketball and football are bringing in a lot more money than any other programs over there, just from the TV deals and everything that comes with that. So that's definitely something that Micah's like, well, we should be getting, the second largest portion of the pie here at this school, just behind football, because of the money we're generating for the university. And I think that's maybe where those conversations kind of just differ between board members and Micah Shrewsberry. I don't know if it was like not respecting Micah Shrewsberry as much as it was, this is what we feel our basketball program is, not just no matter who the coach was at that time. And I think Micah probably had the similar conversation with Notre Dame, and they might have been a little more invested in that NIL market and focusing on men's basketball program they have great tradition with and a lot of respect for around the country. So I think maybe that also factored in when you have that Zoom call so late as well, when it's just really when he has his mind turning on a lot of different things as well.
And Notre Dame had always sung Micah's praises, as I said before, right? They did go after the home run candidates. They didn't specifically name who they asked first, but when they went and said, okay, who are the other 80 realistic candidates for this job, and went with the nationwide search, Micah was always their top choice. And I'm not saying that Micah wasn't the top choice for Penn State. They weren't thinking about, okay, who are we going to hire? Who are we going to let go? But Sandy Barber brought Micah Shrewsberry in, gave him a chance. And Micah Shrewsberry, at the heart of it, is a really good coach. He's coached at Purdue. He's been a head coach at IU South Bend. He coached as an assistant for the Boston Celtics. You don't get many NBA coaches at Penn State. Okay. That's just to see Jason Tatum being involved with the program sparingly, right? Jaylen Brown coming to Penn State football games. Like, this was exciting stuff. This was different. It made Penn State basketball, at least it put the program in a more respectable manner. And I just don't feel like that it was taken for granted, Adam. It really was.
Yeah, I think they thought they hit the home run on a guy that was kind of underproven. But, I mean, Micah, credit to him. He made himself extremely indispensable and made himself extremely valuable in this program really quick. He didn't waste his time. In 2 years, he became one of the top coaching candidates in the country for new jobs opening up, these marquee jobs. And that's how good he was attacking the transfer portal, recruiting at such a high level. Two of the top classes in Penn State recruiting history came under his tenure in his 2 years here. Obviously, the one class never actually showed up to Penn State because they all decommitted and flipped to Notre Dame. Right. But it's just, I mean, he did a really good job building this program really quickly, and he made himself such a valuable candidate around the country. And I think Penn State was a little hesitant because they hadn't seen that in a basketball coach yet, where now they have a guy. They've seen it with football. James Franklin was being sought after by a lot of different programs, but they had not seen that in the basketball ranks yet. And now it was time for them to really start to try to figure that out. And they were maybe just a little late to start to transition there, especially a guy with Pat Kraft, who just got there and was thrown into this decision in his first year at Penn State.
It is Locked On Nittany Lions. The Penn State basketball expert himself, Adam Sheetz, returns on a subject that's very important as it was just released. And we're going to talk more about just the whole situation of what was going on and what led to the departure of Micah Shrewsberry back to his home state of Indiana. The move made sense. It seemed like Micah Shrewsberry was doing it to spite Penn State and Happy Valley, but there were more things underneath the surface that we did not necessarily see originally. Let's talk about that in just a second, Adam. But first, let's hear from our sponsor of today's episode, and that is eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. And it's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head over to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure that every part you need fits right the first time around. That's important. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know that the part will fit. or your money back. And because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop with eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts, that's 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, the right prices, all at ebaymotors.com. That's ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay guaranteed fit, only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, exclusions apply. And Locked On Nittany Lions is your go-to podcast for HappyValleyInsider.com. Check out Penn State Rivals for all the latest in Penn State football recruiting. Now the latest with Penn State men's basketball. Not exactly good news coming after media availability, Adam. When you get to see practice, you get to see the players. Now the roster is finally all together. And you just have this news, and it feels strange because I liked Micah Shrewsberry a lot. This isn't about, okay, do I not want Coach Rhoades? Do I want Coach Shrewsberry more? That's not necessarily what it was about. I thought it was simply that Micah Shrewsberry and his family were homesick. Okay, Micah Shrewsberry eats, sleeps, breathes Indiana. He talks about putting peanut butter on burgers because of his roots in Indiana, right? That's an Indiana thing. Yeah. And it became a burger at a State College restaurant, the Shrewsburger. Very, very awesome name, by the way. And I tried it. I 10 out of 10 if it would have gotten him to stay. No, it was a good sandwich. But I'm saying that I thought this was a case of, my heart belongs in Indiana. Penn State gave me an opportunity. And Notre Dame, when you learn about Micah Shrewsberry's background a little more, him and Jack Schwarbrick go a long way back. Micah Shrewsberry is very strong in his Catholic faith. So this made a lot more sense. But then you hear about the stories like this one. And this was at the bottom of the CBS Sports article. And something I don't like to read. And it's a very bad look for State College. And I can only imagine where Micah's home was. Okay. It was probably in a very private neighborhood, given, he was making good money, even though he didn't get the 7-year extension from Penn State, right? And the cops were called on Braden Shrewsberry, his kids. They weren't home, and they were playing basketball outside. And apparently, routinely, there was a neighbor that was all talking trash, talking smack to teenagers, mind you, saying that they're playing basketball too loud. You might as well give it a break. You're not going to the NBA. Do you know who you're living next to? You're living next to an NBA coach, mind you. And then the cherry on top of all of this is the fact that they did call the cops while mom and dad aren't home. I don't know how you can recover from that, honestly. That for me, that's the nail in the coffin, because you're like, okay, let's find something that's redeeming about everything that's going on, because yes, you have the board members that aren't exactly rooting for you, cheering you on with that call, right? You have the contract that's last second that you don't even know that Pat Kraft believes in you in that manner. And then you can't even really feel respected in your own home.
Yeah, it's kind of like, Micah probably was feeling that he's fighting an uphill battle every day, whether you look at the community, you're looking at the university. Now he's like, you think, and I can go back to Indiana, I can coach at Notre Dame, where I have a great relationship with the athletic director. I feel more comfortable. My family feels more comfortable. We've lived there before, and I get to, still do the same thing I love at the high level in the conference like the ACC. So I think there were definitely those conversations being had. And it's just, when you see that, it's kind of hard to see. I like State College. I go to school there. I grew up 30 minutes away. Like, I've always had a great feel for State College and love State College. But at the same time, it's hard to read, and to think that that's going on with the head basketball coach at Penn State is just unbelievable to think.
Yeah, it's really hard to stomach it all. I was not expecting that when we got to, I thought this was just a matter of politics, logistics. Again, it is when you don't know that Penn State believes in you as much as you do. That's why you're looking elsewhere, because you're like, okay, I don't know what my long-term outlook is here. The athletic director did change, and we don't know those other conversations. There's also this, I don't know the specifics of it, Adam, but NIL, again, going back to that call with board members, boosters, and everything else, was an afterthought when it came to basketball. Football got all the attention and then some. Then you have, we have 30 other varsity sports. That's fine. You have to be able to finance those. But basketball was closer to the 30 varsity sports and not football.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that's the issue. I think Micah Shrewsberry and James Franklin, when Micah was here, had very similar ideals. They were like, we got to get NIL right. We're not there yet, and they continued to push. James Franklin's still doing that, still calling out the fans and people just saying like, we need to catch up. We're still behind, and until we catch up, we're not going to be able to compete at that high level. We'll be fighting that uphill battle. And I think Mike had very similar sentiments. I just think Penn State, it's always going to be a football school, and in the winter, this is just how it is in Pennsylvania. Wrestling means more than basketball to most alumni and most people in central Pennsylvania. You just look at what the wrestling team does, winning all the national championships. Their BJC duels consistently sell out when they're over there, and that means a lot, and a lot of NIL money's going to there, and rightfully so. Roman Bravo Young and a lot of the guys that were over there were extremely valuable marketing-wise in the central Pennsylvania area. So I think maybe that was just really hard trying to fight that battle, and I think maybe the athletic department just like sit in Penn State men's basketball with those other programs instead of saying, well, hey, you're with football, because that's the money you're making. That's what you guys deserve. And I think at the end of the day, Micah just had to look and say, we can't compete in the Big Ten when every other program is focusing and giving basketball what they need to succeed. We can't compete. It's not a level playing field for Penn State when the facilities are behind. We're playing in the Bryce Jordan Center, which isn't as nice as some of the other arenas in college basketball. And we're trying to fight the NIL battle. There's just too many things that Micah Shrewsberry was trying to figure out so early. And when another team calling that has most of that stuff already figured out, it's pretty easy for Micah to say, okay, I'll go there and I'll just find my way over there at Notre Dame.
You summed it up perfectly. And I'm glad you got to the facilities, because Penn State, when it comes to basketball, the facilities are some of the worst in the Big Ten. I don't know what it compares to the A-10, the ACC, and Power 6 when it comes to basketball. But that was something that James Franklin emphasized coming in. But look how long that took. That took 10 years before Penn State could finally get on top. And there is still work to do, believe it or not, when it comes to facilities. They finally, let's just take an example. They finally got those single dorms, the studio dorms done in time for 2022, 2023. This was a 10-year project. So Micah Shrewsberry, whose heart belongs in Indiana, that's fine. He's born and raised. He's coached there. He's lived there. He's very devout in his faith. Because I didn't know if Notre Dame, I didn't know if Notre Dame would necessarily be always that perfect destination, because I thought Georgetown would be of interest. Yeah. But I thought that, well, Indiana's closed up. Purdue is going to have Matt Painter for a long time. But then when Notre Dame emerged, I didn't think, okay, Micah Shrewsberry is going to go to Notre Dame. Well, no, because Mike Bray's there. There's not a spot available. And then the second that opened up, I said, oh, no, here we go. But then there were all these things going on behind the scenes. And yes, Penn State's basketball facilities, they're not good in comparison. They are, when it comes to standings in the Big Ten, they are closer to 14th than they are closer to 7th or 8th. They're not middle of the pack.
Yeah, and I think another thing, and then this is nothing against the Bryce Jordan Center, is not owned by Penn State. Penn State kind of rents the facility out. So you're playing, first of all, you're playing in a facility that's not really even yours. They sometimes can't practice on the actual court in the Bryce Jordan Center. They're in their practice gym. They're sharing that with the women's program. I'm not saying that's a huge issue. I'm sure Micah got used to that pretty quickly. A lot of coaches have. Pat Chambers was here for a very long time and had to battle that as well. So I'm sure they get used to that, but that's maybe something he's like some of these other gyms, but we can go, we want to have just a scrimmage. We want to do it we want to put the court down. We want to be able to play full court with the stands out. So they kind of get that feel playing in that atmosphere. And you sometimes can't do that. We have a concert, and that's something that might weigh on a coach as well. I don't know that for sure. That's just me speculating of something that might have came to that decision as well with the facilities, but they renovated the weight room when Micah was here. It's really nice now. If you've ever been in the weight room there, they have a nice tunnel that goes through there to the locker rooms. The practice gym's nice, but then you look, the other schools are renovating as well. So they're getting just as nice, if not nicer, within the same amount of time when Penn State's still playing catch up. And it's always Penn State trying to catch up to those other programs, specifically in the Big Ten. And it's, as we continue to say, it was fighting an uphill battle that Micah was just really like, I can just go somewhere else. And they really want me, and it's a place I really want to go to. And that's where he ended up at Notre Dame. So good for Micah. He got really what he wanted, and I'm sure he's really happy. And that's all that really matters.
And that was the past. And now the news comes out officially. I feel like it's all wrapped up. I don't think there's going to be any more that's said unless there is really something that's under the carpet that's going to come to the forefront of all this. But yes, that was the past, and now it's the present. So is Mike Rhoades the appropriate person to push through all of this? And Adam, before we get to the final segment, where can people keep up with what you do personally and all your great Penn State basketball coverage?
At Sheetz Adam on Twitter. You can find all the stuff us at Com Radio are doing. I have a great team of insiders for Penn State basketball, as well as Penn State football and all Penn State's varsity sports. So just go over there. We'll have everything you need watching all Penn State sports.
In this final segment, it's finding a verdict. Mike Rhoades gets the that I thought that was interesting, Adam, that Penn State gave that 7-year, $26 million offer to Micah Shrewsberry, and then they turned around and said, we're going to give the exact same thing to Mike Rhoades. And they made it public. They made it public too. So they weren't afraid to commit to someone, but at the same time waits for no man. And eventually the train's going to leave the station. Micah Shrewsberry's train had left quite a bit ago, and trains don't really go backwards. It's very tough to make them go backwards, especially when they're going forward. But Mike Rhoades, I'm glad I got to hear him speak in person twice now. He had the introductory press conference when he was hired, and then this media availability. I like the way he thinks through things. I thought it was important to not only stay close to the base that he's built with his coaching staff at VCU and the connections that he's made throughout his time coaching college basketball, but to get the original part of what makes Penn State great, the legacy, right? He went and got a Penn State legacy in Joe Crispin and brings that back. So he's combining all these things, and that seems to be the case for the roster as well. He's combining portions of what made VCU really good, what made Penn State good last year, and then the parts of, hey, we know this game works, but we got to go to other places like Temple, like Kansas City, for crying out loud, to get those other elements, the Miami Hurricanes, to get pieces that will fit into this puzzle. Adam, I like the team now, but we'll get to them in a second, get your opinion on them. But Mike Rhoades as a coach, do you think that he does finish? He'll get an extension and finish the 7 years? Is he the guy that can buck these trends that Penn State basketball is just an afterthought? It doesn't matter because it's a football school.
I think he can, because I think he's a guy that you just listen to him talk and you watch him. He's got a chip on his shoulder, whether someone puts a chip on his shoulder or not. Like, he always feels like he has that chip on his shoulder, trying to prove something to everyone. I think he's going to come in with that attitude. He's been at VCU, a program that, they're a basketball school first, but they're in the A-10. They're not getting all the facilities the Big Ten has. And he said he's been pushing, He's a pit bull with manners, is what he said in his introductory press conference. He's going to be on Pat Kraft about, getting all these things right and what they need to be successful, and he's going to push them. So he's not going to get complacent. He's not going to let it say, oh, I'll just win this way. I don't think he's going to be the guy to make excuses either, like, oh, they're losing. Well, we don't have the facilities. NIL's not there. He's going to continue to push. He's going to continue to fight. We saw how he built this roster. Such a great way to do when, everything's going awry, everyone's leaving. Penn State was already a veteran team that was going to lose a lot last year anyway, and then they lose a lot of the other guys as well. Being able to rebuild that roster, get the coaching staff he wants, I think he's got everything set up for him to succeed, and he's going to have great opportunities. I think he's the perfect guy, just the way he fits Penn State. I think it's just a match made in heaven between Penn State's basketball program and what Mike Rhoades is and believes in.
And this is a destination job. I will say this about Micah Shrewsberry, lamenting over losing him because he was so good. At the end of the day, Micah Shrewsberry was not a lifelong coach for Penn State. For Mike Rhoades, if he's able to succeed, if he's able to use what he has at his disposal, I see Mike Rhoades choosing Penn State as a place to retire. Okay, the only way he's going to leave Penn State is if he's forced out or if he gets fired because he's not having the results. Micah Shrewsberry, at the end of the day, I always kind of saw him going back to the NBA potentially, especially with Brad Stevens as the general manager of the Boston Celtics, and they've been rotating coaches. I'm not going to get into that. Basketball fans understand what I'm talking about. The Celtics do need to figure it out when it comes to coaching. But I could ultimately see Micah Shrewsberry doing that now. But in the same breath, now that he's at Notre Dame, I do see him being a lifelong coach there. So for Mike Rhoades, this is a destination job for him. He's a central Pennsylvania guy. He's made that apparent. He's gone to Penn State basketball games growing up. Like this is it for him. This is heaven. So I like that about Mike Rhoades, the commitment. Okay. Penn State was willing to commit to Micah Shrewsberry. That's fine. Whether it's too little, too late, they were still willing to say, hey, we're going to give you 7 years, $26 million. And then they didn't take that offer away. They gave it to Mike Rhoades as well. They made it public. So I like that there's the commitment there. And it sounds like that NIL is not going to be a problem moving forward. Again, I don't know the specifics, but it's not going to be as bad as they was. I think Micah Shrewsberry walked and frankly crawled through broken glass so that Mike Rhoades could run, so that Mike Rhoades because now Penn State knows what it takes to be competitive in the Big Ten. James Franklin happened to be the right guy to push through it, to stick around through everything, right? He went through so much worse when it comes to coaching a football program in terms of those logistics. But for basketball, Micah Shrewsberry made the concerns apparent. And no, he didn't stick around to fix all of them, but now that's out in the forefront. And I think Mike Rhoades has the support, and everybody's on the same page now. So yes, he can succeed as this program leader.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think Micah Shrewsberry opened up a lot of points, and Mike Rhoades knows all those issues, and he's going to continue to push. But now you have a board and you have an athletic director. They've been thinking about these issues. They've been forced to think about these issues, and now they're starting to address them. So I think Mike Rhoades, through his 7 years at Penn State, hopefully he stays all 7 years. Hopefully Penn State's successful
and more
in his tenure, and hopefully he signs another extension after that they continue to fix these issues. And by the end of this first contract at Penn State's a really competitive basketball program in the Big Ten. They are caught up in facilities. They are right there with NIL, with the other programs in the conference, and they're competing at the highest level. I think that's the dream for Mike Rhoades, to be able to compete at that level year in and year out, get to where the Purdues, the Michigans, the Michigan States, the Ohio States are, where every year you're like, well, those teams are going to be competing for the NCAA tournament, competing for a Big Ten title. I think that's exactly where Mike Rhoades sees this Penn State program going under his tenure. I think he's the right guy for it. He's going to continue to push for those things that need to be changed for Penn State to get there, and he's going to find a way. You know, he knows how to recruit Pennsylvania. He's a Pennsylvania guy. We said it's a dream job for him, and I think he's the perfect coach to come in here and fix all those issues and make Penn State a basketball program that fans can really come around and build in and year out.
So it's just a matter of how quickly he can do it, right, Adam? I think in the first season now, NCAA tournament team, when you hear that, at first it sounds taboo, but then you look up and down the roster, you get the face of a team in Ace Baldwin Jr., A-10 player of the year. You retain some of the good players from Penn State's team of season. And Kanye Clary got playing time and was a trusted point guard, ball handler towards the end of the season as a true freshman. Jameel Brown didn't necessarily get his turn. And Demetrius Lilly, we just knew that he needed some more crafting, right? He was going to be more of a project. And already Mike Rhoades is getting the best out of Demetrius Lilly. Kanye Clary's improving. It sounds like Jameel Brown's improving as well. And then you're able to get high potential players like a Favor Ire. You're getting those one and done seniors. So Adam, I just did an episode talking about what my ultimate takeaways were from the Penn State media availability here in the middle of July. And I look at this team and they don't have any weaknesses. I don't know necessarily what their strengths are going to be. That's going to come in time. That's what the Bahamas trip is for. That's what non-conference play is for. But I look at it, they're not bad defensively. They have height and size. They have athleticism. They can play fast. They can play slow. One of the criticisms was going to be this team couldn't shoot. But then you have Leo O'Boyle. You have Zach Hicks. Ace Baldwin shows that he has no problem shooting the three-point shot. Now Nick Kern is going to get involved. Puff Johnson's a really good three-point shooter from the limited breakouts we've seen at North Carolina. I look at this team and I can honestly sit back. And this isn't me just trying to blow smoke at everybody. This is a team that is not weak, but is it bad to be okay at everything, right? That's the question. Just because you're not bad at anything, are you really good or great at anything? And I think that's the question for this team in Mike Rhoades' first season with Penn State.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of questions that need to be answered. Obviously, we're a lot of time before we have to ask a lot of those questions. They won't play a meaningful game until November, and then you get through that and get to conference play in January. It's just, there's a lot they have to. I am a little concerned about the shooting only because of the way Mike Rhoades talked about it, that he was surprised they were shooting this well. So I don't think he thinks the shooting is going to be necessarily a strength. I think he's hoping it can be, we need to make shots. We can make shots, and it's not going to be a weakness that teams can just sit back and say, Penn State sake of truth. That's why I think Jameel Brown's going to be important for this team, because that's the one thing everyone said about him is he could really shoot the ball coming in. He was really good shooting in practice. They had limited time last year on a team that went to the NCAA tournament because Penn State could shoot the ball really well last year. They didn't really need his three-point shooting. Now they might need a little more with Leo O'Boyle coming over from Lafayette. I think they're a really good team that's come together. It's a weird, none of these guys have really played together before. How's that going to mesh? Can you go into the Big Ten, which might be as strong as it's been ever? You look, Michigan State's bringing everyone back and has one of the top recruiting classes. Zach Seyko's coming back, National Player of the Year. A lot of guys bringing a lot of players back that are going to be very important in this conference. Can Penn State navigate that tough stretch when they're still trying to figure some things out, maybe in early November and early December? That's going to be what Penn State's going to have to figure out. But I think Mike Rhoades has a team that you said they're not necessarily, there's no glaring hole in this team like there was last year with an NCAA tournament team that really didn't have the size to compete down low. Now they have figured out that issue. They have size on the wing, which I think is huge in the Big Ten. And they have guards that can really play an ace ball when Kanye Clary coming back and continuing to improve. So I think this is a very interesting team. I mean, you're not going to really find out until November, but I think this is a team right now that's trending in the right direction towards competing in the Big Ten. Whether that means winning a lot of games and getting in the NCAA tournament, that's a different question. But Mike Rhoades said he didn't want to set an expectation for this team or a goal yet. It's too early. But if they continue to improve the way I think a lot of people think they can, this is going to be a team that's very dangerous and no one wants to see in Big Ten play.
They're not a bad team by any stretch. And I think the experts, right? We have the experts that have Penn State at 14th in the Big Ten is just outright disrespectful. I do think if there are any question marks around this Penn State men's basketball team for 23-24, identity and chemistry. But like you said, we can't have those questions answered until the Bahamas later in November, December as Big Ten play opens up. And Penn State last season didn't really turn the corner until February. January was bad. And you and I had conversations saying that, the Micah Shrewsberry, I jumped off the ship. I jumped off the boat. I thought that Penn State would not make the NCAA tournament. And then as they won the games that mattered most by just a couple of points. It came down to some final baskets, but seriously, they did it. They did it. And that's what it might take again, because chemistry isn't built immediately. It's going to take some time. And even last year, right? Those transfers coming in, Jalen Pickett and Andrew Funk hadn't played together. Sure, Pickett and Lundy were together, but then Andrew Funk, who's an integral part of the team, had not played as much and then you have the freshmen, right? Keba Jai and Kanye Clary. So this is kind of that all over again. And if Mike Rhoades and this coaching staff can get it all together and build the chemistry progressively. He said that's one of the biggest challenges, getting these guys together off the court. Not specifically that, but that's just a big challenge in basketball. Basketball brings us together. What can we do off the court to continue to build those relationships? And hopefully they do just that.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the big. That's where the Bahamas trip, I think, is more important than anything. Leaving the country, going to play basketball, as well as all the bonding events you can do down in the Bahamas. It's beautiful weather. Guys can get out, have fun, enjoy the life together. I think that's going to be a big thing. I think, the interesting thing that Mike Rhoades said is he didn't want a lot of grad transfers. He got a lot of transfers in a lot of different classes. I think that's going to be really what's interesting, because normally you get a bunch of grad transfers together. They'll just naturally come together because they're all experienced. Now you have guys, you're trying to bring them all together and they're different ages, and maybe they have different personalities, things like that. That's going to be the tough thing, but I think they have a lot of really good leaders. I like what I hear about Puff Johnson. I like what I hear about Ace Baldwin and how they lead and how they can be leaders on the team. Leo O'Boyle as well, who was told us he was the only senior on his team at Lafayette. So he's used to having to step in and be a leader right away and get the team together. I think that's going to be big for him kind of to step in as well and kind of get this team trending in the right direction chemistry wise. So I'm interested to see how that works. And that's going to be the big thing. They get that done first, get that all settled out by September. Then they can really focus in on the basketball part of it and make this team as good as they can be come January, February, and competing in March.
It's been a while, but I'm grateful that you're back, Adam. And I know basketball's in the off season. There's, we have to be selective with where we can talk about basketball, but excited to have more conversations with you about football, as that is just on the horizon, and then basketball when it rolls around in November and December. So Adam, thanks for the time as always. I missed you, and I know that the everydayers did as well. So thanks for coming back on the show.
Yep. Thanks, Zach. Always a pleasure.
Hey, thanks again for checking out this episode of Locked On Nittany Lions and making us your first listen and watch every single day when it comes to Penn State football, men's basketball, and so much more. Please like and share this episode. Comment your feedback about the coaching situation, Penn State letting Micah Shrewsberry move on, but getting Mike Rhoades in the process. And if you like what we do here, keep following along wherever you get your podcast and subscribe to the YouTube channel.